Nau mai, hoki mai, ki te kaupapa o tēnei wā, ko Jane Retimana tōku ingoa. Welcome back to session 5 of the Point 2022, day 2 of our conference today, which has all been around deep dive sessions. This session's about reframing the future of payments in New Zealand, and particularly we're focused on real-time capability today. Our team at Payments New Zealand and the industry has been working on payments modernisation plan for quite a few years now, and some of the things that have come off the back of that we've talked about over the last 2 days, including the panel that's just been on around open banking and the establishment of our API centre, SBI 365, which Steve talked about yesterday, which are big changes to our core payment system infrastructure. And SBI 365 is taking our payment system to being open every day of the year. There's also been developments in ISO, and there's ongoing developments across the whole payments ecosystem all the time. But we're here today to talk about real-time, and real-time has been on our payments modernisation plan for quite a while now. And while we've put these other building blocks in place and they're coming online, we've turned our view to what real-time capability in our payment system might look like. So today we've got our team here with me to talk about some of the work we've been doing. We're just about to release a discussion white paper document, and we're looking for feedback on that around real-time capability in New Zealand. So today I've got joining me Chad Haighmark from Payments New Zealand, our strategy manager, Geoff Tunbridge from ACI Worldwide. Thank you for joining us from Sydney, and Andrew Weaver, also from our Payments New Zealand team. And between the four of us, we will take you through our real-time journey in Aotearoa. Real-time really, and as we've talked in what Steve said yesterday in his opening address, payments is the bedrock of the economy. And without payments, you can't pay, or an efficient and an innovative and an interoperable payment system, you really can't move the transfer of value around the economy. And real-time payments adds the next layer onto that. In New Zealand, we're looking at this type of infrastructure would have an intergenerational effect on our payment system. And we're looking to leverage all of the good ideas and the content that all the other speakers have talked about over the last few days. So New Zealand, even though we might be a little bit behind other countries, or one of the last in the OECD, and Geoff will talk about that more, to adopt real-time payments, there is actually a huge opportunity here for us to do something that's intergenerational, that's compelling, and that benefits everyone in Aotearoa. So without too much further, I've got a little slide here. This is what Geoff's going to talk about. It talks about the opportunity. So there is absolute economic opportunity with bringing on board real-time systems. And when we talk about real-time capability in systems, we're not just talking about the real-time transfer of value, we're talking about all the other capabilities and wraparound services and data that goes with that. And I think Brett King mentioned earlier today about everything being fully cloud, and a lot of our work and a lot of the engagement that we want to do with the industry and the community will be about thinking about how we use next generation technologies or systems to help us configure a real-time future. And moving into the cloud from kind of on-site servers will be part of that consideration. So the technology is part of the consideration, but for us at Payments New Zealand, it's mainly about what we can do to enable a world-class payments for Aotearoa, and to make sure our businesses and our consumers and our people, our Kiwis and people who come and live with us here in Aotearoa, that they can benefit from this real-time capability. And we've got a payment system that really is modern and world-leading. So without further from me, I'm going to hand you over to our strategy manager, Chad Haighmark, and he is going to tell you a bit more about the work, the actual journey that we've been doing. We've been in train for a little while now, doing a lot of specific engagement with experts around this, and he's got more to share. So kia ora, Chad.
Kia ora, Jane.
There you go.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou, ko Chad tōku ingoa. My name's Chad Haighmark. I am the strategy manager at as Jane said, at Payments NZ. And I look after, with my team, a program called Payments Direction, looking at the future of payments in New Zealand. We work with our participants and members in the industry to understand what the payments ecosystem of the future is going to look like or could look like, and what activities we need to do today to work towards that future. As part of this program, we've incubated a couple of things that you may have heard of over the last couple of days. We looked after the precursor to SBI 365, which at the time was known by the Kiwiism fast as payments. And we've also ran the pilot program for the API, or what became the API Centre. My team also looks after research reports and Payments NZ's environmental scan, which if you haven't seen was in the conference bag, but also available on our website. So I'll talk a little bit about how real-time payments fits into the bigger puzzle of the Payments Modernisation Plan. We released this plan in 2020, and it sets out a view of the payments ecosystem by 2030. It outlines the 9 capability building blocks required to deliver that view. It was the first step in a strategic roadmap that seeks to help understand when payments modernisation activities need to occur to get us towards that future. We also, when we released the Payments Modernisation Plan, the purpose of it was to share our thinking, recent developments for feedback, both with our industry and with the wider ecosystem. And we got a range of feedback on that. One of the key themes of that feedback was that real-time payments was a core component. We needed to work towards that. We needed to understand it better, and we needed to understand how it would fit into the wider ecosystem going forward. And next year we'll be working to update the Payments Modernisation Plan for 2023. And I encourage you to jump on our website and register to get involved in that work when it comes on board next year. You'll see a link later on when Andrew is speaking, or a QR code you can scan. Now onto how real-time fits in. Real-time's a key cornerstone building block of the modernisation of the payment system. It's got an enabling capability that can deliver a range of other factors, and if you look at the diagram that's up on screen there, you'll see we've got real-time down in the left-hand corner, and it plays a key role in a number of the other modernisation building blocks that we've got. When configured correctly, we believe that real-time systems have the ability to address a huge amount of sort of modernisation activities to deliver great benefits and to really push the payments ecosystem forward into the future. And I'll talk a little bit more on this shortly. Before I do that, I'll just very quickly run you through our real-time journey. I won't labour on this slide, but essentially in 2020, stakeholders told us that real-time was the most important initiative to be considering in the future. In early 2021, we established an industry working group to undertake activity to refine that. And thank you to those of you that were involved in that. There was a lot of hard work done in that working group. Off the back of that, we issued a market information gathering request. And again, thank you to those people and those organisations that took the time to respond to that. That's really helped sort of lift the conversation, helped us understand how real-time's been configured around the world, what it looks like, best practice, those sorts of things. Responses to that MIG have informed the work that we're about to embark on next. And that talks about a high-level approach called the modular approach, which Andrew will talk about shortly. And it also taught us a lot of lessons from around the world. We also spoke with some of our colleagues and other payments associations around the world to understand what they had learnt on their real-time journeys and how we could apply that here in New Zealand as we move forward. We also got participant and Reserve Bank feedback, and that again has helped inform what we're going to do next. So just very quickly back to why real-time, or why we think real-time is so much more than just real-time. And like you see there, that's the amazing Waimakariri River in Canterbury. And you can see there all of the different streams that kind of flow together, interconnected. And I like to think about a real-time payments platform a little bit like a braided river. There's a whole lot of different connecting parts that can be tied together by a platform, but it does depend on how we configure it. It depends on us understanding what we need to do, who we need to serve, and kind of what those people and organisations are after. As a quick example, some of the things that you can embed or work through with a real-time system include rich data, a broader or improved participation, so easier and more flexible connectivity. You've got improved accessibility, both for people who are looking to pay micro payments more frequently, people who perhaps don't have the funds to carry them across the weekend are able to get access to those, and we heard a little bit about that yesterday in the plenary sessions, and also the ability to have a more dynamic fraud prevention. And you do hear a little bit about people saying, particularly some of the implementations in other countries, that with real time there's an increase in fraud. On the flip side of that, there's also much smarter technology that you can embed in those systems to help with that at the source. So there's a lot of things. There's a huge big list. I won't labour through further things off that list, but the key point here really is that we want to work with the industry, with payers, with people who are interested over the next 6 to 12 months to really understand what you would like from a real-time system, what you expect it to do, and the different things that it needs to enable across Aotearoa. And that's really what our next phase of work is looking to. We're releasing a discussion document. It will come out in top reads on Friday. And we really implore you to have a look at that document, read through it, and get involved in the discussions that come from it. Andrew will talk more about that shortly. But before that, I'm handing over to Geoff Tunbridge from ACI Worldwide, who's going to speak to us about some research that we commissioned with ACI recently.
Thank you very much, Chad. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to Payments New Zealand for letting me be here. ACI has been involved in real-time payments for a number of years, and key to us is actually making sure we understand what each country is doing and how to support our clients in those markets. And as part of that, we annually publish a prime time for real-time report. The 2022 version came out earlier on the year, and please use the QR code there to get a copy. In that report, we surveyed 53 countries around the world where real-time payment systems exist, and actually delved into the economic benefits across 30 of those countries. And it's those economic benefits I'm going to touch on shortly. But we really do believe it's time for real-time in New Zealand. I myself and my colleagues have been working with Payments New Zealand over a number of years on the real-time working groups, and seeing the benefits and the change and the innovation real-time enables around the world. I think it's a fantastic opportunity for a nation such as New Zealand and your place in the region to grasp this opportunity and to drive change. The real-time report is put together by experts. However good ACI is on payments, we're not necessarily the best analysts in the world. So we work with Global Data, who are an industry-leading provider of information and forecasting, to actually collect data both from central sources and talking to experts around the world that it provides the foundation for this report. To drive the economic results, we then worked with the Centre of Economics and Business Research, CEBR, who took that data and provided an analysis to actually understand the economic benefits countries that have got live systems have now, but also to forecast the benefit those countries were going to have over time from the deployment of real-time payments. As I mentioned, we did 30 countries that are fully live, and that provided the foundation for us to understand how real-time payments can change a country, provide benefits, and really drive outcomes for you. Just the background on the success of real-time payments. With over 60 schemes alive around the world, we find the top 5 markets for the adoption of real-time payments where there are electronic payments are Brazil, India, Malaysia, Thailand, and Philippines. Brazil is really interesting though. From a starting point which was much later than others, they now have over 50% of their electronic payments running through their real-time rails. It's been significant adoption, and that has all been driven by the fact they've made their real-time payment system available not only to banks but to fintechs and other participants who create payment transactions. India, however, is a standout. Through UPI, they've actually now got the largest volume, over nearly 50 billion transactions in 2021, flowing through real-time payments. It's an astounding outcome as they've migrated their country away from cash into real-time and electronic payments. And from the research we've done, we see that over the next few years, by 2026, over 25% of all electronic payments will be real-time. Just coming back to Brazil, their population is only 214 million people, yet 56% of their transactions are real-time now. And that is due to the fact it's assisted their migration away from checks, away from cash. And so as you look at modernising your payments ecosystem and look at your place in the Pacific and how you can drive financial inclusion, real-time can be a real foundation for that. The methodology is important. As I said, ACI, we're payment experts, not research experts. And so working with Global Data and CEBR, we had a three-stage approach. The first was actually to collect the data. And Global Data went out to market and found the transaction volumes and the benefits relating to payment system costs, reduced payment float, and increasing the successful transaction and lowering failures, whether that is through fraud or other situations. That was then taken by CEBR, who looked at the economic impact now, and then using the forecasts from Global Data, forecasted the macroeconomic benefit in the future. All of that information is then presented in the report, and that report is available to you all just to download via the QR code or from our website. In the report, we identify 5 main areas of the benefits of real-time payments. I'd love to spend time talking about them all, but today we're only going to talk about the economic growth. But I think it's worth touching on the others before we move on. Real-time payments enable innovation. They drive change. They force participants to look at their ecosystem within their organisation and make everything real-time. Whether that's your core banking system, your reconciliation, your information flows, your customer experience, it has to be real time. Because otherwise the customer doesn't know whether a payment's been successful or not. They drive revenue potential as you can create customer experiences. And this is really where fintechs and some of the participants earlier on today can join and really drive change. There are new revenue potentials from the move to real time. People want that experience and they are prepared to pay for it. You also get the situation where you can actually create value-added services. No longer are you just passing a payment through, but with the additional data that can flow through, you're in a situation where you can actually provide reconciliation, link it with receipts and invoices and statements, and create new experiences for your customers within the payments ecosystem. And I think looking at Chad's model earlier, as you looked at the foundation blocks across the bottom, identifying customers, rich data, etc. All of those can be supported within a real-time payments ecosystem. And then there are the cost benefits from actually having a system that allows a single set of rails to support many payment types, reducing errors in payments, reducing float, driving faster use of payments. All of those 4 give the economic growth that we see countries around the world benefiting from. And from the work we've done, and partnering with Payments New Zealand in a report that will be available in the next few weeks, we've identified the potential benefit for New Zealand as well. So let's look at some headline numbers before we look at New Zealand specifically. Around the world, there has been, by 2021, by 2026, 184 billion of economic benefit that can be achieved directly to consumers and businesses from real-time payments, through lower payment errors, reduced float, the ability to use the money. In 2021, it was identified at 46 billion. When we look at the realised economic benefits at a macro level, we're up to $173 billion by 2026. That is equivalent to over 10 million jobs. It's a fantastic opportunity to change the wealth and the abilities of countries to lift their people up and to get benefit and drive growth. So through the work we engage with CEBR and Payments New Zealand, we applied the same analysis to New Zealand. And the numbers that have been identified in New Zealand are that actually by 2026, there could be $759 million of direct benefit to the market here, increasing to 776 million by 2027. Now the speed of that benefit is down to adoption. We forecasted on an adoption of rollout by 2025 and then a fast ramp up, given the fact we have a very mature payments ecosystem here and great participants across the banks and the fintechs. But the headline number I really want to call out is the one at the bottom right. CBR predict that if there was a wide adoption of real-time payments by 2026, we could see $6 billion of macroeconomic benefit. Now, this is a hypothetical number, but that benefit is an incredible change for New Zealand. That equates to 2.2% of GDP. Having looked at the GDP figures for New Zealand over the last 10 years, you're probably averaging around 2 to 3% GDP each year. So you increase it by 80% just by deploying real-time payments. The ability to use money over and over again within the same day. That is a fantastic opportunity for this country, and I really want you to grasp it. As I look at the opportunity, I think it's also worth grasping what else you could do with real-time payments. It is this ability to connect, and the most successful schemes around the world, which New Zealand has the opportunity to learn from, have actually not just stopped at looking internally, but actually looked externally and connected externally. So we have within Asia, the Asian Payment Network, connecting Singapore and Thailand together to allow cross-border domestic real-time payments. In Malaysia and Thailand, they're now doing cross-border QR payments. So as their citizens move around, they can make payments in their currency but in another country. Also, ISO 20022 has been a great catalyst for this. It standardizes the information flows and allows the data to be used for many other things. It drives some of that innovation and opportunity and customer experience we mentioned earlier. So as I look at it all, I think it is primed for New Zealand to take advantage of all the learnings from around the world, grasp the potential economic benefits and drive an outcome over the next few years. And so I'm very excited to what Payments New Zealand is doing with the industry and the great work Chad and Andrew and the team have been doing. So to finish up, there are massive cost benefits from deploying real-time payment systems. Modern systems using modern technology that take advantage of cloud technologies, virtualization, to improve the process, take out payment failures. Because your float is now reduced because it's real time, get rid of that cost and drive different experiences. Everyone who participates can create new value-added services that really create better customer experience, better customer loyalty, and actually simplify the value chains of business we all exist in. There is an opportunity to generate new revenue from new products and services. Whether that is through the banks or through fintechs, those revenue opportunities exist. And there are examples, whether in Brazil, in India, in Thailand, Malaysia, that can be copied or adapted for this market. And it will force innovation. Where we have dark parts of our organizations, and we all do, where innovation isn't happening, when you go to real time, every part has to be real time. And that innovation will create change and opportunity. All of those will create economic growth for New Zealand, for the people, for the businesses. You'll be in a situation where you can create new connections, new change, new growth. From a study by CBR, we're in a situation where a respected economics research body has identified potentially 2% increase in GDP by adopting real-time payments. And you have the ability to launch and grow using the learnings from all of the organizations and countries around the world. You can do the best thing by looking outside and seeing what everyone else has done. As I mentioned, the report is available online or via the QR code, and please go ahead and read it. And we look forward to, in the next week or so, making available the New Zealand specific research with Payments New Zealand. On that note, I'll hand over to Andrew. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, I aku rangatira. Nā miti nui kia koutou katoa. Ko Andrew Weaver tōku ingoa. I'm Andrew Weaver, part of the team. And big thank you to Jane, Chad and Geoff for the insights we've shared so far. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about this phase of activity that we're moving into with our real-time engagement program. So I'll take you through a couple of components to that and refer to some of the previous speakers, both today, but also from the sessions yesterday as well. So we all know, and hopefully you knew before you came in, but certainly a lot of the conversations we've had through the Point 2022 have talked about the complexity of the environment, the payments environment. And while we want everything to be super simple from a customer experience perspective, both business, merchant, and consumers, we all know that there's a heck of a lot that's going on in the background. So this is a complex network. It's a complex systems that we're working in, and as we move forward with that, there's also a whole bunch of different stakeholders and different participants playing different roles within this ecosystem that we're moving towards. So our challenge right now is trying to tackle what is a complex shared problem and trying to navigate through that. And that's the role of Payments New Zealand in this environment. That's the challenge that we've picked up, and what we are doing now is broadening our discussions and our intent around widening that conversation and actually exploring the different components that are going to make up what this ecosystem looks like. So it is about collaboration. It is about exploring those ideas. It's about understanding perspectives, and it's about collectively figuring out what the best approach is for us moving forward. There are a lot of design considerations for us to take into account. There's a lot of options that we can choose to take or not take when it comes to designing new infrastructure like this. So our opportunity and our challenge at the same time, flip sides of the same coin, are how do we navigate through that. So the paper that Chad has referred to, you'll see more about it in Top Reads tomorrow. The discussion paper's titled Payments for the Next Generation, Real-Time in Aotearoa. The title is deliberate. We are future-looking. We are looking at the possibilities and the foundational components of what's going to be needed in our future payments infrastructure, so we can take advantage, we can benefit from these advances that we're seeing all around the world. Also, we need to take into account the risks associated with moving. A number of people have already talked about fraud potential in a real-time environment. What does that look like? And yes, of course, you need your fraud detection systems to be real-time as well. So those sort of components are ones that those are the questions that we need to be exploring as we design these foundational aspects of what real-time needs to look like. I'm not going to talk in detail on this slide, quite deliberately. It is included in the discussion document that we've been referring to. But there are a couple of elements that is worthwhile calling out. This particular diagram is a depiction, a very simplified depiction of the current payments infrastructure that we're operating and what a modular real-time ecosystem might look like. I stress that when we're putting these diagrams and these pictures in the discussion document, this is the starting point for our discussion. These decisions have not been made. What we are doing is putting forward what we have seen and what we believe is an architectural approach which is going to best serve the needs of Aotearoa now and into the future. Now, when we look at the components here, the modular approach that we're talking about is characterised by a centralised capability, and we believe that there is new centralised infrastructure that's required for real-time, and that manages that real-time, that instant payment switch, but it also it's ISO 20022 native. There was some reference to that yesterday. It's built from the ground up with the ability to handle rich data flows. Similarly, it's built from the ground up with the ability to connect to an ecosystem. So it's API enabled out of the box. We're not talking about retrofitting to existing legacy systems. We're talking about a new set of rails, if you like, and a number of jurisdictions have talked about their real-time infrastructure in that way. a new set of rails that are actually modern and adaptable. So there's been a hell of a lot of advances in this technology with the likes of ACI and other vendors in the marketplace about how this type of real-time technology can be deployed. And we are, in some ways, it's quite fortunate for us that we are a late adopter, if we want to call it that, because we take advantage of those new capabilities. And this modular approach in particular is one that has emerged through the lessons learned in deployment of real-time infrastructure in all of those 60 countries which already have it, or are in the process of implementing it now. So another aspect of this, and a very brief mention of it, is settlement. Settlement risk is a big regulatory factor, and it's a big risk factor in terms of how you manage real-time payments, because there needs to be certainty throughout the ecosystem, and there needs to be mechanisms to manage that certainty. If you look at jurisdictions like Australia, for instance, they've gone by, they've actually tightly integrated the clearing and the settlement components of their real-time transactions. So every single line-by-line settlement with their reserve bank. And we won't talk about outages. Anyway, there are, however, other approaches for managing that settlement risk. And some of those, and a number of the vendors, the MIG exercise that Chad referred to, a number of the suppliers and the other payments associations around the world gave us advice on, actually there are approaches where you can use net settlement models here with the appropriate forms of either accounts or collateralization or even CDBCs, if you want to go that far, to manage your settlement risk. So it gives us a lot of options. Which is really good from our design and implementation perspective in terms of how we take things forward. There is a lot more on these flows and the core of that modular approach infrastructure in the discussion document itself. And we're also going to be, this is what we're going to be engaging and talking with you about in the coming weeks and in the coming months. The first of those, we've got a webinar that's next week where we intend to walk through the document in more detail and have the opportunity to delve a little bit more into some of the questions in the building block components. In terms of how this would look in action in terms of a payment transaction, this is taking a very reasonably simple payments flow and just putting it in the context of what a real-time modular infrastructure would look like. So in this case, we have a receiver and a payer of money at both ends of the triangle there. We have the receivers and payers. We have the financial institutions who are the account holders in this sense, and you automatically think of our traditional banking structure in terms of banking accounts, but we're not limited to bank accounts. They can be, those account holding institutions can be holders of stored value. They can, in theory, also be crypto assets, C2EC as well. Those sort of features are possible in this type of infrastructure. In the middle, we have this real-time system, and it's pretty, I won't say it's small, but its functions are to move those transactions in real time. But as I referred to earlier, the modular approach, what you've got with that is native rich messaging flows. It's designed from the ground up with that type of capability. And secondly, you have the ability for different types of organizations and participants to plug into that real-time infrastructure. And again, putting this forward as this is our discussion document, our starting point for our discussions. The API discussion that we just had with the panel and Phil and the team in talking about bilaterals. Potentially in this type of infrastructure, we can have the third parties, the fintechs, the solution providers, the innovators, plugging straight into the real-time system and initiating payments or initiating access to information directly from the real-time system, possibly in addition to bilateral agreements as well. But this type of approach, it gives us the ability to be a little bit more simple And this is one of the centralised benefits that come from having that sort of that core infrastructure. The ability to plug in is a little bit easier in that sense, and it's designed like that from the ground up, like I say. This is also why we need to discuss and we need to talk about what these foundational components look like. What is the risk profile of those organisations who plug into this infrastructure? How do we trust that those systems are safe and secure? How do we trust that the data which is being handled in a way which is mana enhancing, it's privacy preserving, it's consented, it's not being misused, and it's not at risk of being hacked either. So there are a lot of considerations as we go into this in terms of building the rules and the standards that are going to be associated with this type of infrastructure. Moving on to a different lens. Another component of this is looking very much at the consumer lens, at the people who are at the end of these payment transactions. What do they want? Now, if you're familiar with the Payments New Zealand work over time, is some consumer research. There was a study done in 2020 which tested consumers' attitudes on a number of different things, a number of different topics around payments. We have repeated that study in 2022. Now we're going to be releasing the results of those. Keep an eye out for top reads next week. And we're going to have a lot more information about the insights from that consumer research survey. But what we've done is incorporated some of the headline ones in terms of real time and incorporated them into the discussion document. And this is interesting. There's a couple of points I want to pull out here. Generally, there is a high level of interest in features which are enabled by real time. So one of the questions that we asked, it's not part of this graphic, one of the questions that we ask in the survey is whether people are satisfied with the speed of which they both send and receive payments at the moment. And generally people are saying, yeah, a little bit faster please. We wouldn't say no if you went faster. But it's interesting, it's like 43% of people said that yes, we're interested in sending money quicker. Not surprisingly, 57% of people said that they like to receive money faster. It's always the way. But when asked directly about interest in instant real-time payments, 82% of respondents said, yeah, that's a great idea. I support that. I'll be interested in using that. So it's interesting how even the questions that are being asked and the different responses we're getting in that regard. Similarly, a very high interest in more information flowing through the system, the ability to carry information, electronic receipts, warranty information, travel tickets, all of those sort of things that can be enabled by a modern ISO-enabled infrastructure. There is a high appetite for that type of thing. Payments notifications, again, is one where there is a high degree of interest in terms of people's ability to know when they're receiving money or know when a payment has been accepted. One interesting, in fact, here, and I'm not going to talk through all of those stats there, but one interesting observation that we had, and again, it's a theme which has come up a couple of times in the conversations over the last couple of days, is the generational differences. Anna from RFI, if you didn't catch your session in the morning, it's a good one to go back to when the recordings are available, because she talked in some detail about the different behaviours and the different demographics of what's driving those behaviours, and we're seeing very similar results in our consumer research here. So picking on an example here of perhaps QR code payments, being able to make a QR code payment in a retail environment. Overall, 56% of people are interested in that. But if you look at the under 35s, that jumps right up to 71%. In the over 65s, it drops right down. And we've got 37% of people. So there is a high appetite for these new features and the data-enabled capability, with a very strong bias towards the younger generation. That's who is interested in using these new features. And partly this is why we're positioning this document as payments for the next generation. We're thinking long-term. We want to think. We need to think long-term. the investment that we need to make to do it is such that it warrants that long-term view, long-term thinking coming into play. Moving on to wrap up this part of the segment, and we are going to have questions, so I encourage you to throw questions into the app if you've got some. The perspectives is really important here. This is a very highly simplified diagram. It's just really explaining some different actors in the system. Senders and receivers of money. That's consumers. It's also businesses. It's organisations who bill customers. It's organisations who, it's your tradespeople who need to bill people. It's your markets down in the waterfront. It's people who need to send or receive money. We need to understand what their needs are and what their priorities are in terms of the payment experience. We've got our traditional account holders, the banks, but as I referred to earlier, we're also talking about potentially stored value here, of stored value accounts, transport accounts. We could be talking about buy now, pay later accounts. There's all sorts of different financial institutions who could utilise real-time infrastructure. We have our innovators, our solution providers, our fintech community, the API community. They are all people who are potentially have both solutions to bring to this environment and ideas around how that works, but also they're the people that we need to be navigating those discussions around, okay, how do we come up with common standards? How do we come up with the trust model that we need? What do we need to do in terms of security and privacy? Those sort of considerations we need to bring into bear. And lastly, on the right-hand side there, we have infrastructure. Our starting model for this is we believe there is some centralised infrastructure required. And as soon as we've got centralised infrastructure required, we need investment in that infrastructure and we need somebody to operate it. A number of the respondents in the MIG have talked about, we talked about cloud. There are platform as a service options for this. There's also core infrastructure in terms of building something which is more hosted on site, and there's some regulatory considerations there in terms of sovereignty as well. But they're an important player in what we're talking about. And our intention over the next few months is to engage with all of these different communities with all the various lenses that they have to make sure that the foundation blocks that we are designing for this future real-time system are appropriate, fit for purpose, and are meeting the needs of the community that we're serving. So, you'll see a QR code, hopefully, coming up. There we go. And this is a link to the page on the Payments New Zealand website, which gives a little bit more background on real-time, but more importantly, gives you the opportunity to register your interest in being involved. What we are doing over the next few weeks and months is having a number of different forums, so some specialised workshops, webinar sessions, Q&A sessions with all of these different audience groups that I've just referred to. We have an initial webinar that we're running next Wednesday, the 16th at 1 o'clock, and that's intended as a walkthrough suitable for all audiences. And really from there, we're going to start to branch out and talk more specifically with different communities. And just a point on that, in terms of the innovation community, the solution providers, we will be working hand in hand with the API Centre. We want to take advantage of those 100,000 hours that Phil referred to, of investment in working together that is the result of the API Centre activity, and use that IP in the real-time design that we're moving forward with now. So with that, I'm going to pass back to Jane, and we have the opportunity to go through some questions.
Yeah, we just have a little bit of time. There's one thing about payments people, and we love to talk payments, and Andrew's very passionate, and Geoff and Chad about what we're doing. I'd just like to reflect before we move on. Our kaumātua o tēnei rewiti yesterday in our mihi whakatau talked about the 3 baskets of knowledge, and that was the past, the present and the future, and looking in those contexts. And I think it's important when we look at the real-time journey and the intergenerational view and the next steps, that we actually acknowledge where we are as a system today, because although in some areas there's some discussion about not being world leading anymore, payments get to people's accounts all the time safely. And we've got, most of our payments through our current clearing and settlement systems, the bulk of those are getting through before lunchtime. We've got a 1 hour kind of turnaround on those. So while they're not real time, and obviously we're absolutely looking to this future type of technology, I think it's important not to be too hard on ourselves where we are, but we absolutely need to acknowledge, and I think everyone that's talking, acknowledge what's that opportunity of that next step. And so, Geoff, my question to you is, it's every jurisdiction has to look at their own characteristics and where they are. And obviously in New Zealand we don't have cheques anymore in the system. We're low cash for payments use, and so we're actually highly electronic, with electronic payments now, and then converting those into digital forms of payments, leveraging APIs, leveraging this account-to-account system. To me, we should always look at what we would like to do and make sure what we're going to look forward and do is fit for purpose for New Zealand. But if you were to look at a jurisdiction or a comparable jurisdiction, is it the Brazilians? Is it UPI in India? Who, or we take a little bit of it, who would you put that, like the top two we should be looking at, and maybe what type of system we should be avoiding?
That's a very challenging question on the spot.
Might not be good for a payment supplier to be answering that.
I would actually say you should cherry pick the best features from different systems around the world. Every country is different. You're going to have different goals as an industry, and you're going to have different goals as a nation, and you're going to have different goals of how you want to represent yourself in the region and globally. Therefore, what do those goals drive as the features you want? So, India was a fantastic scenario, but for them it was about reducing cash. There are great examples around financial inclusion, and if you bring the Pacific Islands into some of this discussion, there could be opportunities around that. Brazil needed to drive innovation and some inclusion, but it was about getting more out there because the banks were quite limited in their spread. And so it was about enabling the fintechs. I think of what's going on in the UK now with the new payments architecture there, about driving down to a single infrastructure and ecosystem for all payment types, and so driving efficiencies. So I think there are things you can learn from all. As listening to your question as you were preparing it, very much going through my mind, you actually need to start by making a decision. Are we almost branding real-time payments to get people to adopt it, or are we adding capabilities that we're then going to make those capabilities provide benefit, say an addressing service for making sure payments get to people and identifying participants, and then moving all of the payments over to the new rails, so that intergenerational journey and the lower systemic costs ongoing. So that's probably the first decision. Is it something like Malaysia, where you have Do It Now and that's branded and people want to use it and it becomes part of discussion? Or is it something where you're adding capabilities that can be used across all payment systems, and it's about making the whole payments experience, and let's actually go broader, the commerce experience better?
Exactly, yeah. And we've got a few questions here, actually. We've got some of our key payments people from the industry asking questions. And one was about if we had real-time payments, would we need open banking? And I think actually you probably answered that, and looking at that modular system, it certainly is the opportunity.
It's an enabler for it.
Exactly.
The architecture of a modern, adaptable, real-time system is such that it enables that access for APIs, both in terms of the read access and the access to the information, but also the payments initiation components of that as well. And we benefit from all of that IP which has been developed around the world, and by combining that with the work that's already done in the API Centre and the drive for open banking, there is a synergy there, absolutely.
And with our current systems as well, right? I mean, the way that they're operating, the extending that out to being open every day of the year. On Christmas Day, I could send you $5 as a Christmas present.
Oh, yes, please.
Geoff, that'd be
But
nice.
I'd almost switch the premise of that question the other way around. If you want to achieve the ultimate success with open banking, you need real-time payments. Because open banking is real-time. APIs are real-time. Therefore, there is an expectation that the whole value chain you're doing through the open banking experience becomes real-time.
Yeah, and we've got a question here, a little bit more detailed question about the settlement model for real-time. Would it be before or after interchange? Output before settlement versus after settlement? But Chad, you'll be able to answer where we're at on those types of decisions.
Yeah, we still need to discuss that, and one of the fantastic things about adopting a modular approach is you can also go modular on your settlement and potentially start by utilising some of the capability that's already in the system and working up to something that looks a little bit more sort of true real-time in terms of that settlement.
But again, it's the context of the question here is really important. It's not the order that they happen. What we're doing is we're managing risk. So the discussion we're having there is a settlement risk discussion. What's our best approach for managing settlement risk? Now, again, benefiting from what the worldwide community has been wrestling with in real time and developing over the last 10 or 15 years is a whole bunch of configurable options. It's great. Now, so instead of saying, oh, what do we need? We've actually got a number of different models that we can apply and ask the questions in that context. How are we going to manage risk? Here's a bunch of options that we've got. What is the best approach and what's most appropriate for Aotearoa New Zealand? And that includes obviously discussions with the regulators around how their view on that settlement risk and what that looks like.
And I think it depends on the services you run on this new infrastructure. Obviously, a simple person-to-person real-time payment, you can have a net settlement after interchange, but you start bringing in other forms of delivery versus payment, property settlements, etc. You can have multiple settlement models depending on the service type. And that then supports the economic growth of innovation, fintechs coming aboard, offering different services that meet what probably weren't traditional payment areas.
Yeah.
And I think this reinforces some of the work that we're about to do next. And one of the amazing things about the MIG and the information we got from that was just that we went in with a very open mind, asking sort of best in class what people did, what they'd recommend. And we got back sort of what do you want? And I think that represents the maturity, I think, globally of some of these real-time systems and some of the providers. And it really is very configurable. So I guess that's why it's important to be out talking, understanding what it is we need here in Aotearoa, what's right for us.
Absolutely. Well, we've come to the end of our time together. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, Chad, Geoff, Andrew, thank you for being with me today, the team, and you'll be seeing a lot more of us, and I'm sure Geoff will like to keep skipping across the Tasman and coming to join in our conversations over the next few months. And our call to action is the discussion documents coming out in our Top Reads channel. If you aren't subscribed to our Payments New Zealand Top Reads, just go onto our website. There's a link there, so you'll get all our news, but you'll be able to register, download the discussion document, and we really, really encourage you to kind of jump in our waka. I think our chair said that last night at our gala dinner. You know, we need everyone paddling together. We've got a lot of conversations to have. There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of scratching of the head to be done, but the best approach is to keep making progress. So thank you. This is I'm signing off from the Point 2022 right now and the team, and I'm going to be handing you back to Steve Wiggins, our CEO, with our last session with Scott Farrell and Simon Jensen, and it'll be fascinating hearing from Dr. Farrell about what he has been doing over in Australia. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. It has been lovely to be here with all of you, the delegates. Thank you to our sponsors, and we will see you shortly and be having some real-time discussions, hopefully kanohi ki te kanohi in person, but if not, online. Ka kite anō.